and let's take it over to TK.
Hi, Jen.
And then the Shakeman. So it's all yours. Bye-bye. We'll be back. Shakeman Show on WMYXradio.com.
It's time for Classic Album of the Week with the Shakeman, brought to you by Precision Guitar Tech. Need some guitar repair? Visit their Facebook page or give Mark a call at 215-280-3903.
Well, when I was about 7 or 8, I think my first experience of seeing like rock music was on TV when I saw the Beatles. And then, just being a kid, that really inspired me to want to play the guitar. And, there was another very popular TV show at the time that I was into called The Monkees. And I used to love that show. I loved Mike Nesmith's guitar playing, and the songwriting was really, really cool. So that was kind of the early stages or introduction to rock or pop music that really got me into wanting to play guitar. So my mom bought me a little 3/4 size Harmony acoustic guitar, and she had a teacher that would come to the house, and I wanted to learn how to play songs, but he would not only teach me the guitar, but he taught me how to sing and play the songs together, which I think maybe was the early stages of me playing guitar and singing. It was like songwriting lessons and singing and playing guitar lessons more than guitar. The guitar instruction was very basic. So, I did that for a while, a number of years, and learned the basic chords. And remember when I got into maybe middle school, junior high is what we called it in Philadelphia. I started hearing a different sound from the Beatles or the Monkees, and it was like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith. And once I heard that, and the Rolling Stones, I remember hearing Jumpin' Jack Flash and Brown Sugar, and that from that point on, and all through like my high school years, it's just that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to play electric guitar, and I bought an Ibanez electric guitar. Was one of my first Les Pauls. It was like a Les Paul copy. I earned the money for that myself, and the first Gibson that I got was like the golden ring for me. My mom bribed me to get out of school with this guitar that I saw in a local music shop, and it was a '78 Gibson Custom. And the deal was if I got my diploma, because I wanted to go join a touring band at that point, and I had some offers from just like cover bands, local cover bands, and I wanted to kind of just get on with the music thing. So she bribed me to stay in school, and so from that point, like most guitarists, pretty much self-taught on the electric. And I love Jimmy Page, and I just try to cop his riffs and learn how to do that vibrato and all that. And what I didn't realize, what I was learning how to do was play blues, because I didn't know what he was doing was called blues. And once I figured that out, I started to delve back into blues, so that became a big part of my background too. And that was a cool thing to be able to interpret, what your heroes learned from in your own way too, and kind of combine the two. But basically, from high school years on, I was putting cover bands together, and that's where I learned how to play and sing and write songs, and played the Jersey club scene pretty heavily with a lot of different bands. There was this huge scene in South Jersey. It was all covered clubs, but there was a cover club on every corner because the drinking age was 18. So they were packed nightly. And you would work 5 nights a week, 5 sets a night. And I started doing that when I was in high school. We got on a work-study program where I'd go home at noon and go to bed, and then go out to play clubs with cover bands until get home at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then drag myself to school the next day. So that was like my early wood shedding and cutting teeth. And eventually got, tired of that scene. I started to wonder why, Led Zeppelin and the Stones and Rod Stewart got to make records, and obviously it's because they had their own songs. And that's when I wanted to get out of the club scene and the cover scene and start writing songs, and that's what I did for a number of years, and that eventually led to putting Cinderella together. My first exposure to real blues, I was probably about 17 years old, and there was a drummer in one of the cover bands that I was playing with, who was an older cat, and he gave me B.B. King live at the Regal, and we sat down and we were listening to the record, and I looked at him and I said, "That guy sounds like Jimmy Page." And he said, "Well, no, actually it's the other way around." And then, that's when the light bulb went off, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So he said, the blues was an influence of Jimmy Page, and that's where I, realized that. And then I started delving back into, obviously, I started listening to the B.B. King because I liked his playing, but also Muddy Waters and Johnny Winter and all that, amazing slide work that he did, and Elmore James, another really cool blues with the electric slide. I love the Delta sound. And even going as far back as the, acoustic, very broken down Robert Johnson and Son House stuff, I love. So, and I'm glad that he gave me that record, because I learned a lot from being able to go back and listen to and interpret and learn from what the people who inspired me did, and I think it gives you a greater understanding of music. So when I got into rock after I heard the Stones, at an early age, and started playing electric guitar, they became my heroes, and my friends and everyone, that wanted to play an instrument wanted to emulate that. And I grew up on the music of the late 60s and the 70s, which is, you're talking Janis Joplin and Rod Stewart and Bad Company and Free and Joe Walsh, the James Gang, and I could go on and on. The Eagles, to Fleetwood Mac, to Heart, to Led Zeppelin, to the Rolling Stones. It was an incredibly creative time for music. And not only did those artists influence you in a musical way, but they influenced you image-wise. You wanted to be like them, so you would start to emulate them. And all my heroes were pretty flashy. I loved Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and they were cool and had a touch of glam vibe to them, and Janis Joplin did, and Aerosmith did. And so you learn in the same way in a fashion sense that you do in your music sense. And I think when Cinderella came around, and we were in part of the decade in the 80s where so much importance was placed on the visual because of MTV, I think the over-the-top look that developed in the 80s was a result of us wanting to take our heroes to a whole nother fucking level. And the 80s was all about excess. And, and I think that that's what it was about, and I think that, probably most of my buddies from those bands, would tell you the same thing. It came from that glam, hard rock, imagery of the 60s and the 70s, and trying to take it somewhere new, because now all of a sudden there was this new visual thing called MTV, where it was as much about the visual as it was about the music. So, I think that the whole decade got caught up in that, and not just in the rock scene, but you look at the pop scene, from Cyndi Lauper to Boy George to Madonna to, everything in the 80s was fucking over the top. And it was cool. It was a great decade. There was this really cool photographer that we met called, what's his name again? Mark Weiss. That's right. One of my very best buddies. And he shot the cover for Night Songs for us. And it was shot in the historic district of Philadelphia, which is where we were from. And I believe that structure we were standing in was called Head House Square. Is that right? I may have that wrong. It's been a long time. My memory is starting to go too. But the most interesting thing that I remember about that shoot was the album was called Night Songs, and Mark scheduled the shoot for daytime. And I kept saying to him, "That's not going to look right." And he said, "I shoot day for night." And I don't know what the fuck that meant. And I just trusted him, because I kind of liked this guy right off the bat. I thought he was a straight up cat. And sure enough, when we got the pictures back, it looked like it was nighttime. So Mark Weiss is a fucking genius.
Welcome to this week's classic album of the week. This week is Hometown Boys Cinderella with their album Night Songs, released August 2nd, 1986 on Mercury Records. Now, it's always fun for me to be able to do Hometown Boys because I grew up with these guys. I got to see these guys before they became famous, before they hit stardom. And it's really cool to be able to cover bands that you were able to follow from the beginning all the way up until they got to their stardom. And it's great because these guys were kicking ass in the mid 80s. I was only a youngster going to the under 21 nights at the Empire Rock Club up there in Northeast Philadelphia, and they used to sell this place out so bad. They were getting so popular, you couldn't even get in to see these guys anymore. And the record deal was just right around the corner for these guys. So I remember seeing these guys ripping it up, 84, 85, around that time in the scene. And it didn't take long for these guys to get a record contract with Mercury Records. And before you know it, Night Songs came right out, selling millions of copies due to the combination of Cinderella's breakthrough single Nobody's Fool on MTV Airplay, and of course having an opening slot for the man that actually noticed this band and helped them get a little towards that record deal, Mr. John Bon Jovi. So getting to open up for them didn't hurt either. On February 7th, 1987, Night Songs was certified double platinum for shipping 2 million copies. So not too shabby there. But it's really cool to be able to see the local guys get the break that they deserved. And it's really cool because I remember like demos that they put out. I remember seeing the guys in the club scene. You wouldn't even recognize Nobody's Fool because it actually started out as a ballad and would kick into a kick-ass rock tune at the end. It would just pick up and go sing it, It's just that one of them ballads that just kicked into a hard rock tune by the end, but they decided when they put it on Night Songs to keep it a straight out ballad. It's a great tune. It was really, really, really cool how I seen the transition when the album came out. Nobody's Fool cracked the top 20, reaching number 13. The third single, Somebody Save Me, went to number 66. On May 4th, 1987, Cinderella filmed parts of their concert in Philadelphia. These live songs were along with their 3 MTV videos released on home video in August 1987 on the Night Songs videos. I remember having that, the old videotape. They also, on VH1 program The Metal Show, Night Songs was rated number 5 on the show's top 5 worst album covers on great albums listed. You'll hear a little bit of Tommy Kiefer talking about the album cover, which was shot in Philadelphia by the famous Mark Weiss, who took many, many cool band pictures and did a phenomenal job. You'll hear all about that with Tom coming up. Or you might have heard about it already because I think he talked before I came on. So anyway, carrying on. Night Songs, great friggin' album. If you don't have it in your collection, the hell you waiting for? Get it. Song, of course, kicks in to the title track. Number 1 track is Night Songs. Going into number 2, it might be a little familiar to the Shakeman show, Shake Me. Number 3, Nobody's Fool, which I just talked about. 4, Nothing for Nothing. Number 5, Once Around the Ride. 6, Hell on Wheels. Number 7, Somebody Save Me. Number 8, In From the Outside. 9, Push, Push. And wrapping it up at number 10 with a kick-ass rock tune, Back Home Again. Every song on this album kicks ass. This ain't one of them albums that you hit the skip button on your CD or your forward button on your cassette. This is an album that you can put on from track number 1 to track number 10 without stopping, forwarding, anything like that. It's a great album. You'll enjoy it from beginning to finish. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal album. On the album, of course, Tom Kiefer, lead vocals and lead guitar, and played a little piano on there too. Jeff LaBar, really cool dude, got to hang out with him a few times at the Empire. He played also some lead guitar, back vocals. Eric Brittenham on the bass. You heard some stories about me and him back in the day, but I'll keep that cool right now. He was on the bass and back vocals, and Fred Curry on the drums. Actually, I don't think any of his drum tracks are on the album. He's on the album. His picture, his name is on the album. But I think he joined shortly after the recording. Shh, don't tell anybody. But anyway, great friggin' album. Night Songs, a great friggin' album. If you put it in your collection, you'll be very happy that you said, hey, I listened to the Shakeman and did that. So, yeah, very, very, very cool album. And it's very cool that I can sit back and say, these are the hometown boys that I got to see in the beginning of their career and make it and shoot through to become, pretty famous. And they made a couple more albums after that. And, the rest is history. Everybody knows. So, yeah, definitely a cool album. Philly boys. So it's a special classic album for me anytime I do guys that I got to follow. So it's really, really cool for me. So there's not much more to say. Night Song speaks for itself. Put it on. Even if you do have the album, you haven't listened to it in a while, put it on because you're going to sit back and be like, oh wow, I remember how cool this album was. So yeah, so sit back, put it on from track 1 to 10 without stopping it. Just continue to enjoy it. It's an album that will definitely go test the test of time, and it's really, really cool album. So that's all I got to say about it. Just put it on. It speaks for itself. So I want to just say the Cinderella Night Songs was a special album to me, and it was very cool to be able to do this classic album of this week. Join us next week for our next classic album. See ya.